Lloyd Ecker.
And I'm Sue Ecker, and we are the producers of the Outrageous Sophie Tucker and the authors of the book I Am Sophie Tucker. And we'll be chatting with Rabbi Sol Solomon on Dave's Gone By on UNC Radio.
You know, over the years, people have called me a red-hot mamza, but the original, the real red-hot mama was someone named Sophie Tucker. She was a huge star in the early part of the last century for singing, for doing comedy, for being a zaftig red-hot mama. Well, it was before my time, but I want to talk to people who remember her, to recall the woman who helped give the world my Yiddish mama, Sophie Tucker, and there's both a book and a movie about her now, both by the same people, the folks that we're talking to on the telephone this Saturday morning, Sue and Lloyd Ecker. They've written the book called I Am Sophie Tucker, a fictional memoir, and more recently they have released the Outrageous Sophie Tucker, a documentary with such talking head people as Tony Bennett and friends of the neighborhood like Carol Channing and Shecky Green and the late Joe Franklin and Barbara Walters. Sounds like a wonderful film and certainly an interesting topic. So won't you welcome with me to the neighborhood, Sue and Lloyd Ecker. Shalom.
Hello
Hi there.
Shalom to you. Thank you so much for joining us. First, most important question. Ecker could be kind of a Jewish name, but Lloyd, I don't know so much. Where are you on the religion scale, you two?
Hungarian Jew.
Jewish and Jewish. That's good. You're Hungarian, which means you're both from Hunger, which is lovely to me. So, Sophie Tucker has been a running theme with you two from literally your first date. How long ago was that? And tell.
It started back in 1973, and the two of us were at Ithaca College. Now, Lloyd, being the big man on campus, was in charge of getting concerts to the school. And he had a small competition from a little school across the hill named Cornell.
Oh, well, okay.
Yeah, but he got a call from a promoter that said, we have a cancellation. She's a new singer. Do you want her? He said, I don't know who she is, but send her. Well, that concert was our first date. Now, there I am sitting in the front row with Mr. Big Shot sitting next to me, and the next thing I see, he's up on stage. He says, I'll be right back. And I'm thinking, oh, great, what kind of a date is this? When I see him go up on stage, and he says, okay, everybody, give a warm welcome to Miss Bette Midler.
Not so bad.
Now, she was fairly well known by then. This was early in her career, but it wasn't like the gay bath years. She was past that.
It's really new, right before she got on Johnny Carson.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And then we have dinner with her backstage and with her piano player, Barry Manilow.
Huh?
So now I'm thinking I'll go on a second date. He's not such a schlub.
Well, not compared to Barry Manilow, that's for sure. But no, just speaking of gay baths. But okay, so you met Bette Midler. First of all, what was she like in those? Was she the same off stage as she was on?
She was. She was full of energy and a lot of life. It was great. She was so enthusiastic. And we had a great time. And that first date led to our getting married and having 3 kids. And then once our kids went off to school and Lloyd sold our business, he came home with the check and he said, what do you want to do now? I said, well, first, I'm going to put that check in my checking account.
Yes. Well, by the way, we should mention, unless I'm mistaken, there's an interview with you guys. That check was for $23 million.
No comment.
Am I off by a zero, or am I off just by like $1.95?
Right, that's what it was.
I hope the IRS isn't listening.
Well, no, but here's a question before we even continue with this. Your business, it had to do, well, you were parents of 3 children, so that gave you some kind of idea involving little tykes.
Yeah, we made these products back in 1982 with a bumblebee on them, and they said for the father-to-be, I wasn't showing so much then. According to Susan, I'm showing now.
I had the belly, but he, when the kids were coming along, but he didn't.
And so we made these hats and mugs and all these tchotchkes for the father-to-be, with, and those were the words, father-to-be with a bumblebee.
Cute.
And we put that logo on everything, and it sold like gangbusters until we came to the internet in 2003, actually. We went online and started collecting names of pregnant people with their permission so that we business that we sold to a public company for what you said. I can't repeat it.
Okay. I can't even repeat it. If I repeat that number, I'll faint. For God's sake.
That's what Sue did when I brought the check home.
I can imagine. Well, do you watch Shark Tank? Do you watch that TV show?
Yeah.
Are they doing it right? I mean, when you see that, do you go, oh, I can tell what they're doing wrong, or you can't guess, or what?
You know what? We were a 30-year overnight success. So, it's just sticking with it and putting it out there.
We didn't have any help from Mark Cuban.
Right.
Well, no, but you obviously helped. So did you go from literally middle class to rich overnight? You said it was 30 years, but...
Yes. You know what? We put the money... I said it's in my name.
No, but he wants to know... I want to correct him. We went from almost bankrupt to ridiculous.
To ridiculous. And so we live the same as we always lived. It's just that now I sleep at night.
Oh, I know the feeling, or I wish I knew the feeling. But all your kids can go to college, their grandkids can go to college. That's the difference,
Exactly. And then we had all this money. We could do whatever we want with it. And Lloyd said, what do you want to do now? And I said, well, I really want to have dinner with Bette Midler again.
Oh.
And he said, I have a better idea.
I said, let's find out who this Soph is, because she did these Sophie Tucker jokes in her act every year, even back in 1973. And so I said, let's find out who this Sophie Tucker is. Then we'll make a documentary, which we finished. It's opening in New York and L.A. on July 24th.
Uh-huh.
Then we'll write a book or two, and we finished the first one already. That's called I Am Sophie Tucker. Then we decided maybe in our dream we would then take the first book and turn it into a Broadway musical.
Oh.
Which is now being considered by some guy named Harvey Weinstein.
I've heard of him.
And then we would hopefully turn that into a Hollywood musical.
You mean a movie musical, kind of it, yeah?
Yeah, movie musical. Then when we get to the older Sophie Tucker, we'll hire Bette Midler to play the part.
Oh.
Win the Academy Award, and then we'll have dinner again with Bette
Midler. Oh, my... Well, Bette Midler has done Broadway again. She was in that Sue Menger's one-woman show about 2 seasons ago. So she may be very well... She was kind of burned by the Tony Awards, but she might be up for it. You never know.
When she was a kid, before even the baths, she was in Fiddler on the Roof as Chava, I think.
Seidel.
I played Chava in a Fiddler on the Roof at the community theater. I was already getting hair on my face, so it was not that convincing. I ended up making her Italian. But don't even know what that means. We're talking with Sue and Lloyd Ecker. So the movie came first, then the book. So...
Actually,
sorry.
Came first and was in 2006 this all happened, and we decided we were going to do the research. So we went and looked for any biography that we could find, and we found out that there was an autobiography in 1945.
About Sophie Tucker. That was it. Sophie Tucker.
And there were 2 other thin volumes of her biography, and in one of them it said that there were scrapbooks that they used for research, a few scrapbooks in the New York Public Library.
Okay.
And so we went down there to research them, and they only had like 3 that were available. The rest were buried under a tarp in the basement, like Raiders of the Lost Ark. And we tried for 6 months to get to them. And they said, we couldn't get them until we finally made a donation of the library so that they could have them microfilmed.
Oh,
and
okay.
That was how they were finally excavated from the basement, and they're now all on microfilm, but we were able to research them, and it took 4 years of research for us to go through all of the scrapbooks.
Well, there are a bunch of questions now that are in my head. First of all, does her autobiography that she wrote in the 40s jibe with what you read in the scrapbooks? Did she obfuscate things? Did she hide things? Did she tell the whole truth? What?
That's a great question, because after we were finished reading these, for all of these, for 40 years it took us. There were 400 scrapbooks. After we were done, we went back and reread the autobiography, and we realized that 85% of it was made up.
Oh, boy.
15% was maybe. And so what we decided to do, and by the way, the reason that was because she had, for 10 years, she tried to get her real autobiography printed, but it was too salacious. Four publishers turned it down until finally they said, just get a ghostwriter and fix it up. So she got 4 ghostwriters over 10 years. By the time she was done in 1946, after 10 years of trying, this is what came out, and it was a bunch of baloney. So
it was fun to read, but it was very...
Well, people say that about the Richard Rodgers autobiography, that he kind of, smoothed over all the affairs he was having and the chorus girls and stuff. I know my friend Dave, who produces and hosts this radio program, he is currently, literally, as we speak, he is reading the autobiography of Georgie Jessel, and there ain't nothing whitewashed in that. So, I don't know if you ever read that one, but woohoo!
Yeah, he had a lot of young girlfriends.
Oh, boy. Oh, man, he's certainly
so what happened,
not shy. Yeah.
we decided that if Sophie was alive today, she would want her actual autobiography printed. And since we did all this research and verified through letters after letters from her friends of all the real stories that happened to her, we were able to recreate the first of what we think will be 3 books of her life for the real story. And so our autobiography,
sort of, see, yeah.
It says fictional memoir, and the reason it's fictional is because we did it in her first voice, in first person, and we feel that we have created 85% of the real stories back to the way they are, and 15% are maybe. This particular book goes from 0 to age 27.
Okay. So how famous was she by 27? Was she already...
already a headliner, a star. She had opened the Palace, and she was on her way. She was a headliner in vaudeville. That was it. She was off and running, off to the races.
Just to give you some comparison, she was at age 27, she was as big as Madonna or Lady Gaga or anybody else, Elvis, the Beatles. That's how big she was in 1913.
So that's still the height of vaudeville times.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask, though, I mean, I have to say there's something a little bit bothersome about the idea of a fictionalized memoir, only because there's so little except for her own book. It's not as if scholars now can go to your book and use it for research or quotations. Because if you don't have the footnotes and the citations of the scrapbooks that you used, it has to be treated as fiction. It might be a fun read, but you're making problems for anybody who really is trying to use it for scholarship.
Right. That's why it's a fictional memoir. But what we have done is we've put all 400 scrapbooks on microfilm so that researchers and scholars can, now they have access to those scrapbooks that were buried for 40 years.
Also, there are, I think, 200 pictures in there, and those are real. There's all kinds of letters and telegrams and things like that. It's pretty close. You're right about the fact that it's not a legitimate scholarly book.
But it's a fun read.
But it's
sure.
Fun, and it's literally the basis of the coming Broadway play and Hollywood musical.
And it gives you a sense, when you're done reading it, that you've really sat with Sophie for the last 2 to 3 days, whatever it takes to read it.
We did that Shirley MacLaine type of thing.
Channeled her.
You channeled her. Can I ask, does she have any remaining surviving ancestral or post-ancestral relatives that you had to check with, or that you wanted to get in touch with, or did the line stop like 50 years ago?
She had a son who never had any children, so
right.
The direct line stopped. She had a nephew who passed away but had two children. So, and her niece-in-law, his wife is still alive. We interviewed her. We interviewed her two brothers' sons were alive. They were in their 90s and 80s.
Wow. Okay. So you did you did first-person research. It wasn't just
and they had a lot of stories to tell us that some of it we could put in, some of it we could put in the documentary, some of it we couldn't.
Sure.
They didn't give us permission to do it. So, yes, but that's all. There weren't that many surviving relatives.
We definitely talked to about 25 relatives over the 7 years that we made the movie. We also talked to 80 stars and friends of her. Some of the list you already gave, but we basically reached out, and because we were doing it so long at that point over a 7-year period, the word got out to anyone who knew Sophie Tucker or passed by her, and I can tell you totally 100 different people that we got on videotape.
Can I ask you what are one or two of the best, most unexpected stories that you got, either from friends or from actual famous celebrities that you were rolling tape for?
Well, one of them was a story about J. Edgar Hoover, which I don't know if we should tell that one because that's
okay.
in the documentary. You're going to see it in the documentary anyway.
Tell him.
But there are letters from J. Edgar, so we knew she was friends. But there was he was an honorary nephew of Sophie's that was sort of like an intern with her when he was younger. When she was in Vegas, he was always at the shows with her, and he told us this story. He was still alive at the time. We have him on tape. That he's sitting after Sophie's show. He's sitting between J. Edgar Hoover and Sophie Tucker, and at the end of the show, he leans over this guy Ron, and he says to Sophie, "Sophie, when you're done with that dress, can I have it?"
So the rumors are true.
And the rumors are true.
You know what's even funnier, and I'm sure this is also covered in the documentary and certainly the book, there's a thing that Sophie Tucker was close friends with J. Edgar Hoover,
yeah.
but simultaneously she was playing cards every week with the anti-J. Edgar Hoover, what would you say? The direct opposite.
Yeah.
Who?
Al Capone.
Al Capone.
Right.
Now, how did she straddle that line? Not to mention, how come J. Edgar Hoover didn't say, could you bring Al Capone to our table so I can arrest him? Make life easy.
Oh, that was earlier in her career when she was with Capone, and then J. Edgar came about 10 years later. So by that time, I think Al Capone might have been at the Hotel Alcatraz.
That could be. Well, maybe she played there. I don't know.
But she hung out with all the gangsters all the way through the beginnings of Las Vegas because that's who owned all the speakeasies in the 20s where she worked, and that's who owned all the hotels in the beginning of Las Vegas. So she considered them business partners, and they considered her a human cash register. Because wherever she went, they knew she was going to bring in people and fill the joint. And so they respected her. She respected them. Never had a problem with money or any of that other nonsense. And like most stars of those times, she also had a little gambling problem, which...
Oh.
So they liked it that they got their money back.
Did she lose everything, or was she good enough that she was set in her later years?
She was set in her later years. As a matter of fact, over the course of her career, she gave over $8 million to charity, and that's at a time we're talking about, the 20th century.
Wow.
$8 million was a lot of money. When she passed away, she had $4 million in her estate, which she gave most of to charity. So yes, she did gamble. She loved to gamble, but she knew her limitations, and she would always make sure that it didn't become a problem. It was just a fun thing for her to do. But I'm sure she spent a lot of her money.
A lot of the reason she slowed down at the end of her life was because, like most stars, she had an entourage of family members that she needed to take care of. I mean, we're talking about her sister, her two brothers. Then she put one of her nephews through Yale. She was very, very giving and very, very Russian, and like we are Hungarian.
Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention to both of you that I am your long-lost half-black son. So when you next go over your will, you might want to throw in a little line there about Rabbi Sol Solomon, You know, I don't need much. Yeah.
Well, if we had made any money in the last 10 years, I would help you out, but we didn't make anything on that deal. It's all fiction. It's a fictional...
As a matter of fact, whatever we made, we put into this making of this movie.
No.
I would hope the movie did not cost, you know, you can make Apocalypse Now again for But actually, I am curious, because I love the idea of filmmaking. I love the process and movies. So when you said, okay, let's make this movie, you had to put together a budget, you had to put together a time frame. Take us through it.
Well, that's the beauty of making that big amount of money. We didn't have to answer to anyone or have a time frame.
Or a budget.
I mean, obviously, we'll be glad to tell you that it did cost 7 figures to make this movie.
Wow.
Low 7 figures. But what it didn't have was a time frame which allowed us to get all of those interviews that you read. I mean, it took us 4 years to get Barbara Walters to agree. It took us 4 years and 1 day to get Tony Bennett to agree when Barbara Walters did the interview.
Now, stop there. Again, I'm curious about this. What would have stopped Barbara Walters for 4 freaking years? Was she too busy doing the View? Why would Tony Bennett wait 4 years?
But we didn't have credibility. You know, we didn't have, who were we?
We were nobody.
But we started to do the research, and the more research we did, the more proficient we became in the subject of Sophie Tucker. And then, actually, when we started, we were researching the scrapbooks at the New York Public Library, and then we realized, we learned that the end of Sophie's life, from 1957 to 66, those scrapbooks were up at Brandeis University. And we realized if we wanted to find anybody who knew Sophie and interacted with Sophie who was still alive, that we needed to work backwards. So we went up to Brandeis and started to research the later scrapbooks.
Oh.
And that's when we saw Tony Bennett had worked with her. Barbara Walters' father was in business with her. So, I mean, you know, he owned the nightclubs that she performed in. The Latin Quarter. Michael Feinstein was, you know, all of Paul Anka and Kay Ballard. So that's when we realized that there are people out there who actually did work with Sophie. And so we started contacting those people. Michael Feinstein was tremendously helpful in getting us people to interview because he was just so generous with his time. So that's what, and once we started interviewing people, and we had them on our list of people we've interviewed, then it became easier to interview other people. And that's why it took so long, because first we had to get it out there that we are the Sophie Tucker people.
Okay, so it wasn't like you approached Tony Bennett the first day, and then 4 years later he said yes. It didn't occur to you to ask Tony Bennett until 3.5 years in. That's different. That's
right.
Okay, that's very different.
And then once we realized that Tony Bennett would have known Sophie, or had known Sophie, and maybe had stories, we started to call his people.
Sure.
And that's what took another year or two to finally get in the door. And the only way we got into the door with Tony Bennett was because we had landed an interview with Barbara Walters. And that gave us credibility with Tony Bennett. So landing the Barbara Walters interview opened up the door to have, you know, Tony Bennett as well. So that's, you know, it was like that kind of process.
No, I totally, I mean, again, I can't speak for Dave, who is the host of this program, but in the early days of Dave's Gone By, it was tough to get guests. And then as you start getting some well-known and famous guests, you know, you start telling the people who handle the guest, hey, so-and-so's already been on the show. They've been on the show. They've been on the show. And then the people start going, oh, I guess you're legit. I guess it's a real thing. Sure. That's how it works. It's true.
You got to get experience and names.
Yeah.
Now, did you have a whole crew? Did you do your own camera? I mean, how many people did you have in production and post-production?
Well, we actually hired an Academy Award-nominated 2-time Emmy winner named William Gazecki to be our director. He's the one that guided us on that. We tried, actually, to get Bette Midler to be the narrator, but she was too busy at the time. She was in Las Vegas at the time doing a show every night. So the only other persons, according to our director, after he tried a lot of famous people and contemplated it, he decided, after doing some taping knowledgeable. We became, by default, the utmost authority on Sophie Tucker's life. And so we decided we would be the narrators of the film. It also took into consideration that Susan was on her way to be a professional actress at Ithaca College, and I had done about 5 years of stand-up comedy at that same time. So we weren't like completely rubes. We had some performing experience, and people tell us that it's pretty nice to watch.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I have not yet seen the film. I'm going to as soon as I possibly can. And by the way, you said it's opening on the 24th in where? New York and
LA and Boston.
And Boston. Yeah.
After that, it'll be going wider and probably even to Colorado.
I would hope so. Is it, when you say it's opening in New York, are you having a one-nighter, or is it staying a week or two, and what theater?
We got 3 weeks at one theater called the Cinema Village in Greenwich Village.
Of course, yeah.
And it's also at another theater at the JCC in Upper Manhattan. It's also at the Lemley chain in Los Angeles.
There's 2 theaters there. And
2 or 3 theaters there. And then one other theater in Irvine, I think. I forget, Westville 8 or something. But anybody who wants information on any of the places that we're playing, they can go to our site, SophieTucker.com.
You actually got the URL for SophieTucker.com. Bravo.
The first day we thought of the project, being that I'm in the internet business, we found it, we got it, and it was ours before anybody knew what we were going to do. And so if anybody wants to see any of that or is interested in the book or the dates or the theaters that we're playing at, it's all self-explained on the site SophieTucker.com.
SophieTucker.com. By the way, let me ask you, Sue and Lloyd Ecker, or Lloyd and Sue Ecker, depending on which one goes through an open door first.
She gets top billing.
She gets Sue and Lloyd Ecker. Now I've forgotten what I've forgotten the question it was. Yes. Your film is what, about an hour and a half?
Yes.
If it were 2.5 hours long, what would you have added in, like in a director's cut?
Stuff. We had at least 20 more minutes of film that we had to cut because it was too long.
So what was on there?
We made 2 versions, actually. So we knew that Sophie was very, very popular in England and also all the surrounding areas, believe it or not. She played in Ireland. She played in Scotland. She was everywhere. And in 1922, she went over there and decided that she wanted to be as big in England as she was in the United States. So she ended up meeting the King George V, King George VI, and Queen Elizabeth sat on her knee and bounced. So she knew everybody over there, the prime ministers and all. So we made some segments that are about 20 minutes long of her experiences in England so that when we go to England in a few months, we will be playing that version at 96 minutes instead of the U.S. version. There's even footage from her Royal Command performances. We got that too in that English version. There was a lot of stuff. We had a lot more. There was a whole segment on horse racing, I think, that we had to cut that will probably be in the DVD when we have extras on the DVD.
And there were a couple of fun sections about, she was real big with her birthday. Every year her cake got bigger and bigger, and the birthday lasted longer and longer because, she made a big deal about it. But, so there were some fun segments, but when we had a cut, that's the kind of stuff that had to go out.
Sure. No, that's a great answer to the question, because I was curious especially about that. Who was the most fun person to interview? Not the one that you're most, oh my God, I'm talking to so-and-so, I can't believe it, but who was the most enjoyable?
Interviewing Carol Channing. She was so much fun and so energetic and so alive. It was great. And the best part is, after we interviewed her, she and her husband invited us out to lunch. And there I am. I'm sitting at a restaurant next to Carol Channing having lunch. I was like, pinch me, make sure I'm awake. It was great.
I can imagine. Hey, speaking of also celebrity things, let me pull it back to you, Lloyd, for a moment. Since you were booking concerts for your Ithaca College way back when. Makes me curious as to some of the folks that you booked there, and if you have any cool anecdotal stories about them.
Well, my favorite one was, now we're talking about 1973. We were very, very big Star Trek fans, and I was in charge, and I sort of was like a dictator, I'll have to admit, because I decided I was going to get everybody that I ever wanted to see, because they gave me the budget, and I knew if I liked it, I was hoping that most of my friends would like it. So we got the creator of Star Trek to come, named Gene Roddenberry.
Of course, yeah.
We picked him up at the airport. It was like I was seeing a god of mine, and he was very funny. We got to the airport. Susan and I picked him up, and she was also a convert to Star Trek after I indoctrinated her. And we got to the airport, and I said, "Where's your luggage? I'll get your luggage." He says, "No, I'll get it." He says, No, you're the guest. I'll get it. He said, "Are you sure?"
Uh-oh.
I said, "Yeah." So I went to the belt to get the luggage, and I put my hand in the handle, and I tried to lift it, and my arm went down like Jerry Lewis, 7 feet. And that was because he was very well read, and he carried tons of books in the suitcases. And that's all he had. He had one little bag with a toothbrush, and all the other suitcases were thousands of pounds, and he was laughing his tush off.
Oh, I hope he came over and helped you out a little bit.
Yeah.
Well, that's a wonderful story. Do you have any other stories like that of people that you...
Oh, yeah, another one that wasn't so nice, that was one of my idols, was Buddy Rich.
A drummer?
Yeah, I love, I had seen him my whole life, and I loved the jazz, and he was the most horrible, I hate to speak of the dead.
No, go ahead, yeah.
But he was the most horrible person ever. But on the lighter side, we also, Lenny Bruce was like another one of my idols. He wasn't alive, of course. He had already passed away from overdose. But
wait, so you had him on stage? That's pretty horrible. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, we brought in his corpse. Now, we had an impersonator at the time that did a whole show about him, and that was a lovely time, too. We ate dinner with him, and Susan and I enjoyed it, and then he went on stage and put us in the act, basically, by saying hello to us in the audience. It was a lot of fun. Yeah. We had David Fry also.
Oh, the guy from I Am the President and the Richard Nixon. Yeah.
It was 1973. He was very hot right then because he was doing Nixon, and he was fun. I think we also...
Rod Serling.
Kreskin, too.
Ed Kreskin, right.
Rod Serling was just a patron of our school because he was involved with the TV art department. He came every year. Oh. But the guests that I booked, those are some of the guests that I booked. We had a lovely time. And
then the best part was that for the senior prom, we hired Chubby Checker.
Oh!
It was great because when I went to high school, that was the year that everybody decided they didn't want to have a prom. So I didn't get to go to my prom.
So I made her a prom.
So he made me a prom. And then, fast forward 30 years, you Chubby Checker for the movie. So it was a full circle.
Wait a minute, did Chubby Checker know Sophie Tucker?
Yeah.
The reason we did that was because we read an article that he had taught her to do the twist.
Oh.
And there's a picture we have from the newspaper of Sophie doing using a hula hoop. So we knew that she was in that era. She was still with, trying to keep current.
Now, can I ask you about Sophie Tucker? In one place it says that, as you said, her autobiography was very expurgated. It was all, 85% BS and 15% maybe. And that she was known for some bawdiness in her acting, racy and double entendre. And yet, apparently she was kind of prudish in a lot of ways. And yet you're also saying that, no, she had a pretty crazy and racy life. Which is which?
No, she had a crazy life, but she kept herself current in terms of current events. But she never used four-letter words. And in her private life, she was very prudish. But in her act, she was the last of the Red Hot Mamas. And she was teaching young girls how to become, just like that. Teaching them about sex and how to get a man and how to keep him and all that kind of stuff. But off stage, she was just, there's pictures of her in the scrapbook, just like a very down-to-earth woman who was sitting around, schmoozing around the pool with people that were not celebrities, because we didn't recognize any of the people in these private pictures as being famous people. So she was really, she was very Hamish.
Oh, I love that word. So, but at the same time, in your discoveries from all the scrapbooks, was there anything? She was married 3 times. She did have it wasn't a gambling problem. She did gamble. Any cool sex stories or any affairs?
She was married. No, she was married. That was the thing about her. If she fell in love with a guy, she wanted to make it legal, and so she got married.
The same as Elizabeth Taylor.
And so there really were no sex scandals about her at all. It's just that if she did, if she did want to get together with a guy, she made sure that she made it legal.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. Now, we're talking, by the way, with Sue and Lloyd Ecker. We've been having so much fun talking about their lives, talking about the Sophie Tucker stuff that they're working on. So, right now you're in the midst of opening the movie. You do already have the first book out. Who's the publisher on that, by the way?
Perspective Press. It's also available not only on our site, but at Amazon or any of the local bookstores in anybody's area that's listening to this program.
And where are you at as far as writing book 2 of the proposed trilogy?
Well, right now we're not, except that we have the outline for all 3 books, but right now we're concentrating on the scripts for the Broadway.
Oh, the Broadway show, that's right. Who are you?
And the Hollywood
musical.
Are you working with anybody on that? Do you have a librettist? Are you doing it yourselves or what?
Well, the libretto is written for the Broadway musical. We still need to get a composer. And we need to get a producer, but right now that's what we're shopping around is the Broadway script.
And as I said, for real, we have a meeting coming up with Harvey Weinstein.
I mean, not good. I'm not going to give it a kananga hurrah by saying anything more than that, but good luck on that, of course. Wow. And do you have any other, since you made that big pile from putting bees on things, do you have any marketing gimmicks and ideas for putting Sophie Tucker's face or her large body on things?
You know what? Sophie was the master of doing that, because every 4 years she ran for president. So we have buttons that said Sophie Tucker president. I mean, she did it all before us. So there's really, aside from opening the movie and making a Broadway play and a Hollywood screenplay, I think that's about it.
The grand plan was to open this film first, this documentary, and then get the book out there. And then, of course, we hoped that would be enough to get us to the step that we're at now, which when somebody like Harvey Weinstein takes hold of it, will be doing all of that wonderful marketing himself.
Sure.
He's an expert at that. I'm good at the internet, but I'm going to leave it up to the people like that type of person to do the entertainment marketing.
Because, it's if it weren't for Funny Girl, I really wonder how many people besides, show business freaks and geeks like myself would remember who Fanny Brice was.
No
how
one.
many people are remembering Eddie Cantor at this point, or Al Jolson?
Right.
That's right. You're right.
So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring her back. Because she can relate. I mean, there are a lot of women today who emulate Sophie, even though they don't know it. People like Amy Schumer, people like even Lady Gaga, because she's so outrageous. Madonna, all of these people.
Roseanne Arnold, certainly.
Oh, yeah.
No, not a joke, absolutely.
No, absolutely.
No, you're right.
And back in the 60s, it was Toady Fields. So,
right.
Every generation, there are women who do what Sophie did. But Sophie was the first one to do it. And so we really need to bring her back into the fore and let everybody know, where it all started.
She was the first person to take hold of fat shaming and make it work for her. And now Amy Schumer's doing the exact same thing.
And it's the same generation after generation. It's just, it cycles, but you still have to pay tribute and enjoy the work of the forebears. Last question for Sue and Lloyd Ecker, the creators of the documentary The Outrageous Sophie Tucker, which is opening on July 24th on both coasts. Also, the authors of I Am Sophie Tucker, a fictional memoir. And they are, of course, the proprietors of Sophie TotalTheaterProductions.com, where you can find out all about their projects as well as Miss Tucker. But let's talk finally a little bit about the big song, the song, of course, that I love, My Yiddish Mama. How did that become her signature song that she sang anywhere, at least where there were Jews in the audience?
Well, it all started in 1927 when her main writer of material, who was named Jack Yellen, probably nobody's heard of him, except if I tell you that he also wrote another song called Happy Days Are Here Again.
Oh, yes.
He was a prolific writer of songs for general public, but also private songs for Sophie Tucker, and they were both from Russia heritage. They both met each other on Tin Pan Alley back in the 1900s, early 1900s, and then they bonded as friends way back then. And when Jack's mother died, at the exact same time that Sophie's mother was sick, he wrote that song and called her on the phone and sang it to him over the phone. Over the phone.
Yeah.
And so then, skip forward one more year. She started singing it on the vaudeville circuit, but then she went to England, and there was some bright gentleman over there at Columbia Records England who decided to put it on one side in English and on the other side in Yiddish. And then he took that record, and 4 years later it had sold 3 million copies just in Europe. And now we're talking up to like 1931, 1932. Well, unfortunately, if you were caught in Germany in 1933 and on with that record in your house, it meant you were going to the death camp. As a matter of fact, it was the main prize that German stormtroopers were looking for on Kristallnacht. And so it had a storied past. And then, in addition to that, in the United States and everywhere else in the world, it became the Jewish national anthem of the 30s. But we have a story in the film about it. It's all. I won't tell you what it is. I'm going to make you go see it. It's very poignant. But that song meant a lot of handkerchiefs coming out at every single performance until the day she died. But she went both ways in more than one way.
What? Wait a minute. What are you intimating there, sir?
We'll get back to that in a second.
Yeah.
I'll finish this story.
Well, now it gets interesting. Okay, yeah.
If she was in Las Vegas, she didn't sing it. If she was in New York, she sang it. If she was in Colorado, she didn't sing it.
Yeah.
You know, it depended on the audience. If she was in England doing a ritzy performance for the King and the Queen, guess what? She didn't sing it. But if she was in Whitehall, where all the Jews lived, she would sing it. So the song was very, very important all the way until the day she died. And as far as that other thing I just mentioned, there's another segment in our film which discusses whether or not she was bisexual. And like we found out, some relatives told us she wasn't. Some relatives said she was. We talked to a lot of other witnesses who went 50-50 as sort of a joke there. But in the end, we decided that Sophie Tucker wasn't bisexual. She was trisexual. She would try anything.
So there is a little race. Did you find any evidence of that in all those scrapbooks? Did she?
Only letters.
Only letters from female companions. She had a lot of female companions after she divorced her third husband. There are a lot of letters from them and stories of, when she was traveling, she would be traveling with one female companion for quite a while. So that's where we have the idea that perhaps she was bisexual.
But we
can't definitively say that as biographers because we don't have conclusive evidence, and we weren't in the bedroom when whatever was going on.
Speculative.
It's speculative. But, it could be that she just was lonely and she's on the road and she wants companionship. It's hard to say, but we're just presenting the evidence as we saw it from the scrapbooks.
Well, if you want to see that evidence and all the other stories and the people talking about Sophie Tucker, you do need to get yourself to the movie theaters, either in Los Angeles or New York, on the 24th of July for the opening of the Outrageous Sophie Tucker, produced by our guests in the neighborhood, Sue and Lloyd Ecker. I wish you a big muzzle and a big opening of the film, and then taking it all over the country, and gotta see that DVD with all the outtakes. That'll be terrific. Thank you very, very much for spending this time with us, for talking about Ms. Tucker and about your lives. Tremendous luck to you, and thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Take care.
Shalom.